Ladies and gentlemen, listeners of What the Funk, we're back with J-Mac. I guess I never called you that before, but now you're J-Mac.
I'll take it.
Nice. We got Jordan McGee checking in from Minnesota today. Not a Minnesota guy. Well, I guess maybe now I could classify you as that.
I am now.
The oil and gas hub of the Twin Cities. Which are you guys like the only oil and gas company based in Minnesota?
There's a couple of smaller shops, but yeah, I think we make up the lion's share of the activity up here.
Like geographically, though, you're not that far from the Bakken. Like it could be possible. I guess the bigger issue is just like people who know oil and gas that actually live there, right? You're not in OKC, you're not in Denver, you're not in Houston, Dallas, Midland, Pittsburgh even. So how do you find people, right? Which is sort of why you ended up there, right? Moving to Minnesota.
Right.
But we'll get into all of that here. I've been a little bit more inconsistent lately with recording the podcast, which I hate. That's just truly a product of travel. I really try to record every Friday, but it becomes like super difficult to do that when I'm on the road. And then I don't want to travel with my microphone and with my, light ring and all that stuff. So anyways, been a little bit slower, but we're here today. And Jordan, really, really thrilled to have you on. We met 10 years ago at this point when you were in OKC at Warwick. We were young bucks. Now we're veterans of the game. So I'll ask you the question that I always ask to my guests is, who are you, man? Who is Jordan McGee?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. And I was trying to remember the first time we met. Yeah, 10 years at least. I know we have overlapped in a lot of different areas, but glad we've stayed in touch. And now we can take our friendship public. So who is Jordan McGee? I mean, first and foremost, I've got a great wife. I have two small daughters, a 4-year-old and an 8-month-old. So still in the throes of it. And, I love to travel as much as I absolutely can. I think my bucket list accomplishment was I really wanted to see and experience all 7 continents and was able to accomplish that a few years ago. So, absolutely love to travel, love to try new foods, try new drinks. I'm the guy at the table that will order the cocktail that comes out in the smoking dome and all of my friends are rolling their eyes. But that's who I am. And then professionally, I'm the vice president of land technology at Northern Oil and Gas. We are the largest publicly traded non-op oil and gas company. And like you said, we are based in the Twin Cities just outside of Minneapolis.
Well, there's plenty of stuff that we could talk for a long time about. I know that you like to travel. We've actually talked about that before in one of our just informal discussions. You've hit all 7 continents. So now I've got questions. What's your favorite? What's your favorite place that you've ever traveled to outside of the U.S.?
I mean, that's an impossible question, right? But I think we absolutely fell in love with Africa. We went to the wine country of South Africa. It was breathtaking, beautiful. A really amazing experience. And I think my wife, I give her a lot of credit. She's very patient with me. When we first got married, I'd done a lot of traveling before we met. And so when we got married, she was interested in traveling, but hadn't done as much. So she was thinking, maybe Paris, maybe London. And I was like, nah, I've already been there. Next on my list is, safari in Zambia. So we've gotten to go to some amazing places. And if anything, it just reminds me how many more amazing places there are left to visit.
I like that. And was it Franschhoek? Is that where you went? South
Yes,
Africa?
good job.
So I haven't traveled a ton. I mean, I've traveled a lot domestically, but my appetite has been fairly whetted from international travel more recently. When I did go to London and Paris, funny that you mentioned those, which I love. I like London. I love Paris. That's a longer conversation. But one of my wife's friends, now my close friends, started a biotech company in Cape Town, South Africa. This is, I don't know, they must have moved there 2006, something like that. I think they got a grant from the South African government, and it was hire our you know biologists and scientists to work at your company, and we'll give you some grant money to start the company here. So we went down and visited them for a couple of weeks in 2008. And they sort of put together like, okay, you're here for 2 weeks. Like, this is your day-to-day agenda. And one of the weekends we went to wine country, went to Franschhoek, and that was awesome, obviously. Went to Gansbai as well, which is like the ocean. That's where like a lot of people go in like the shark cages. All of
Nice.
that. And then for the second week, we went on safari in Kruger National Park, which was super fun. So yeah, that was really neat. Obviously, it's like a long trip to get there. It takes like a full 24 hours, maybe more. And I remember by the end, my wife was just like, "We just love each other so much right now, don't we?" After sitting on an airplane for 32 hours together. But that's super cool, and I'm glad that you sort of pointed to that one. So like when you do travel, right? Do you like what do you like to do? Is it just like immerse yourself in the local culture? Do you like to stay in cities? Are you more of like an Airbnb on the countryside type of guy? Like what's your strategy for international travel?
So I think there's an important distinction between vacation and travel, right? So a lot of people will go on vacation where they just want to sit at the resort pool for 5 days and never leave. And I don't have the patience for that. I sit at the beach for 2 hours. I say, okay, we've been there, done that. What's next? So I, to a fault, will kind of over program everything and try to pack in as much as I possibly can in the limited time that we have. I think the most recent trip that we went on, we did a little bit of winery visits in Chile, and the hotel that we were booking all this through was like, okay, we've got this optional excursion program. You can go visit a winery. No. I want all the wineries we can stitch together in an 8-hour period. Totally. And, maybe they were right. Maybe that was a little too much, but we had a lot of fun, and got to see as much as we possibly could while we were there.
Love it. So let's go back further, right, to your upbringing. Are you from Oklahoma? Are you from Oklahoma City? Is that your background?
Yep. Edmond, Oklahoma.
Edmond, Oklahoma. So oil and gas had surrounded you a little bit, like it does when you're from a place like Oklahoma. The oil wells aren't that far. You go into Oklahoma City, which Edmond is a suburb of. You see the big companies, right? You've got Devon, you've got Continental, you got Chesapeake, you have spinoffs from those companies. So I'm guessing, just based on your age and the timing of all this, you kind of saw some of that boom with Aubrey McClendon and some of these companies starting to grow. Where'd you go to school, and did you know you wanted to get into oil and gas like from a younger age?
Went to school at OU. Did not necessarily expect that I would end up in oil and gas. Like you said, it was omnipresent. But when I was actually in high school, I had a family friend that gave me an opportunity to start running title. So This was when I was 16, and I was driving out to Pushmataha County in Oklahoma and running stand-up title in the courthouse, taking notes on the yellow legal pad. And not to show my age too much, this was before digital cameras. And I remember the first time somebody brought a digital camera into the courthouse and what an uproar that caused, that people were now getting to take home images of the documents for free rather than paying $1 per page like the county had been used to charging. So yeah, I was running title every summer and winter all throughout high school and college. And when I graduated, I ended up going full time with that brokerage and worked there for a couple of years, got a ton of great experience. This was, like you said, the peak shale boom. We were doing some scouting projects, the double top secret probation. My boss would come in and tell me to pack a bag for a week, and he would tell me where I was going the next day. And got to go all over the country, checking records, helped set up a field office in Ohio before the Utica was really known about. So yeah, got a ton of really great experiences, and then kind of never looked back, just continued on in the oil and gas career.
So you're a land guy. Like that's, I tend to put people in buckets. I classify you as a land guy, even though you're sort of like your title actually is perfect for you because you are a tech forward land guy. And I think part of that is just, like you said, you grew up seeing things the way they used to be done. And now you've really leaned into and embraced the advantages that technology can give to you. But a lot of land people are also lawyers. Did you consider law school at any point?
I did. And because you have a liberal arts degree as well, right?
I do. Yeah. History major.
Yeah, I was an English major. So the intent was to go to law school. I thought I was going to get a few years of work experience and then circle back. And once I started having fun in the industry, I just all gas, no brakes, didn't want to stop.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of my friends, Stephen Hatcher, he's come on this podcast. He's the minerals guy for those people out there. He's created a nice, persona and brand for himself. He is a lawyer, but he grew up in Louisiana, so he's been around oil and gas. And it's pretty cool to see like the versatility of that resource, right? Because I think of him as a land guy, minerals guy. Then he's like, oh, yeah, send me your contracts. I can review that too. I'm like, right. Okay. You're used to reading contracts all the time. You're also a lawyer. He's like, right. So that's neat. So then we met, like we said, 10 years ago. Shout out Marcia Vihel. She was at, I guess that was Energy Navigator, AFE Navigator at the time. Mm-hmm. We had like a pretty strict agreement. Like she would refer me in places where I couldn't sell the AFE workflow because she had to get those deals. But then after she sold it, she'd be like, hey, there's other stuff you can do. So meet Jordan. He's awesome. So set us up. We started to get to know each other. And Warwick was like really small. Talk a little bit about Warwick, like what it was like back then and what is Warwick. I know they're still around. I know it's kind of a prominent company. I think some international, but primarily in Oklahoma City. How did you end up going to Warwick, and what was that company all about?
Yeah, so after the brokerage experience, I did a stint at Chesapeake, like most people in Oklahoma City did. Yeah, that was really my second. That was my grad school, was going to Chesapeake, and it was early 2014, the first wave of restructuring and management turnover at Chesapeake was occurring. And, Chesapeake was a big company, but it had always run like a small company. And with this new management team, they were really trying to enforce a lot more big company policies and procedures and formality.
Sure.
And I realized that, I don't think that that's necessarily what I'm cut out for. I prefer smaller companies where I can measure my impact. I can see the the value that I add. And so when I heard about Warwick, they were early on, like you mentioned. I think I was in the top or the first 15 hires, and they were still closing their first or second acquisition and needed a lot of help organizing that. So I jumped in there. Like you said, they're still around. They're doing great things. It was 2014 when I joined. And if you remember kind of what was happening in the industry towards the end of 2014, we had some challenging years ahead of us, but give a lot of credit to Kate Richards. She managed to still grow and acquire new assets all throughout those next few years. And I helped onboard all those acquisitions, learned a lot about finance from her and the others at Warwick, had a great team helping me implement new land systems, building out ways to more efficiently acquire and integrate assets. And then, was there until I made the switch over to Northern.
So was Warwick an operator, or was this a non-operator investment firm? Like what were they? Are they?
They were both the PE sponsor and the management team. So Kate would raise the money directly, and then we would acquire the assets and manage them. So at the time, most of the time that I was there, we were non-op focused. Okay. They have pivoted from that a little bit and have also diversified into more real estate. Like you said, I think they now have some European real estate holdings as well.
So you really dug deep into the non-op, right? Chesapeake obviously had a bit of everything, a huge operator. Like I'm thinking the time you were there, they must have still had 50 plus rigs running, drilling in various different basins. And then you go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, more non-op focused, a lot smaller. And you were there for quite a while. And then somehow this opportunity comes up and you end up in Minnesota. So talk to me a little bit about like the thought process. Like, what was this like? Did you have kids yet? I'm thinking you were married. Like, that's a big move. You're an Oklahoma kid. You've lived in Oklahoma, it sounds like, your whole life, right? And then boom, all of a sudden, here's this random NOG out of Minnesota, and we want you to work for us. And oh, by the way, we want you to move here. Like, talk to me about how did this transpire, and like, what was your thought process? Were you excited about it? Were you scared about it? Do you have kids? Like, talk to me about this move.
Yeah, it was a recruiter on LinkedIn found me, and this, I already mentioned I love to travel, so if I've never been to Minnesota and if somebody offers me a free trip up to Minnesota, I'm going to take it. So at the time, it was kind of nothing more than that. And I was married. I did have our daughter at the time was about a year and a half. And it was really just being impressed by the senior leadership and the company, what they were trying to do, and the aspirations, what I felt like we could accomplish together.
And so you go up to Minnesota, right? You do the interview, you're impressed with the people, you're open to travel, but this is a move, right? This is a substantial move. You'd never been to Minnesota before, right? So you go up there, you do this interview. Did you go up again and make the decision you were going to move there? How did your wife take this?
Went up for the interview, brought my wife with me. We spent the weekend. We got a little bit of cold feet when it was spring break in Oklahoma, and we were, which is basically summer in Oklahoma. And we are flying into Minnesota and are looking out the plane window and see ice still on all the lakes, and thinking, what have we done? But yeah, had a great visit that first weekend. I was really impressed by the area and thought that the company was a really exciting opportunity and poised to do great things.
Yeah, that's cool. I've been up there once and it was in the summer and it was just awesome. The weather never got above 75 degrees. We went out on some boats on the lake, played some golf, went to a wedding. It was spectacular. It actually reminded me a little bit of where I grew up in New Hampshire, where you deal with like super cold, long, gray winters. But the reward for that is then what you get in the late spring, summer, and early fall, where it's like there's very few other places I'd rather be, right? So it's like you have to put in that
Yeah.
time to get the other time. And now, right now, it's probably getting like really hot in Oklahoma, and you're like, this is kind of nice here right now.
This is my time to brag. Yeah. I didn't expect, because in Oklahoma, you've got summer, which is brutally hot, and then winter is just kind of gray and rainy. And I didn't expect to fall in love with the four seasons of Minnesota as much as I have. So, autumn, getting the first year we were here for autumn, I thought, oh no, the leaves are starting to turn. We have a trip planned. We're going to be gone for a week and come back and we'll have missed it. I didn't know that Minnesota fall actually lasts for a proper 2 months, 3 months. And it's all about the apple orchards and fire pits. It's a good time, but I'm sure you can relate coming from the Northeast. It's fun to have snow on Christmas, and we've always loved getting the white Christmas. What they didn't tell me is that there would also be snow on Easter, which we're still getting used to.
Yeah, the snow's nice, the cold not as much, but you do make a really good point about the four seasons. And I think for me, growing up with four seasons, when I decided, I guess when I was a young adult, to move somewhere, like I did want warmer weather than what I grew up with, but I still wanted four seasons, and Colorado has that. Right, we've got a true four seasons. Fall's probably a little bit shorter than I would like, but I just feel like if you do get used to that, you get used to having the occasional snow day, that it's hard to get away from that. I mean, I'm sure you just get used to it wherever you're at, but it's like, where do you get these random breaks from if your weather's good all the time? Right? I want a snow day.
Well, yeah, the opportunities that it opens up. I mean, like you said, in the summer, it's all about boat life and going out on the lakes and taking walks along the shorelines. And then in the winter, it's a completely different world outside. They're doing big festivals out on the frozen lake. There's cross country skiing, ice fishing. It's a completely different world outside.
Pond hockey, ice fishing, right? All stuff that doesn't happen in Oklahoma, I'm gonna guess. Right?
For sure.
Let's talk NOG for a second, right? So your background, I think, at Warwick and Chesapeake, and even when you were like in high school, prepared you well for a large non-op position company, like you took with NOG. So what has it been like since you've been there? Has the company grown substantially? Like, are you one of the only people that they've moved out from other places, or has this been somewhat of a theme where they say, hey, we want to stay here in Minnesota, we're going to grab people from other patch cities? Is the thesis generally the same as it was when you went there, or is it just kind of growth at all costs? Like give me a bit of a sense of like culturally, and then I guess organizationally, what you've seen in your time there.
Yeah, the thesis is really to grow the production disproportionately to growing the headcount. So we have grown a little bit, but we're still only 40 employees company-wide and doing 120,000 BOE per day. So, we've got a lot of assets, 10,000 wells, 250,000 net acres. We have a lot that we're managing and trying to leverage technology rather than just hiring more headcount.
Yeah. And on the moving front, so who else? Did they grab other people from other oil cities, or are you the only one?
We've most most of the recent hires have relocated.
Yeah, which I buy, right? And I'm sure most people like it too, right? It's a change of pace, and like you said, that sort of Four Seasons approach. Um, so you're a VP of Land Tech, which is not an overly common title. I'll be honest. Did you negotiate that you wanted that title? Not, don't just make me the head of land. I want to be the head of land technology. Let's make sure that we put that in there. And why is that? Like, it seems. I mean, I kind of can guess the answer, right? If you're not going to grow through headcount, then you're likely going to grow through technology adoption, right? So, like, what does that mean? Like, what is the job of a VP of land tech? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is an unconventional title, but when I joined, which this is about 3 years ago, the company was at a pivotal moment where they had historically been Bakken only and had been doing a lot of things in a way that made sense when your assets are exclusively in one basin. But it was a lot of Excel, a lot of email. And the management team, as they started to look at acquiring assets in the Marcellus and the Permian, recognized a need for more modernization. And so that's where, I stepped in and started to reconsider some of these legacy processes and how could we accomplish the same or more with more technology, less people.
And with land, like at least my understanding of it, it's document heavy, right? So you've got leases and you've got title and you've got lots of paperwork. Does that lead you to maybe being on the forefront a little bit more when it comes to AI? Like, I don't know. I deal mostly just with digital, but if you're dealing with paper more, like, do you feel like that lends itself to actually embracing this whole AI trend in terms of like, well, we're not going to add more people to do the physical process stuff. We have to be on the cutting edge of this.
We are, I mean, look, with any new technology, we're taking a measured approach. Right now, we're focusing really heavily, making sure the foundational pieces are rock solid. So, AI is only going to be helpful if your data is good to start with. But we are certainly looking at it heavily and starting to test applications for it. This whole generative AI. I mean, I think people are starting to get sick of hearing about it so much, but it is going to be, the people who are ignoring it are going to be left behind for sure.
Like maybe people are sick of hearing about it, but like you could probably have said that in like the mid 90s about the internet. Like, all right, enough with this whole internet fad, all right? Just give me my newspaper, right?
Yeah.
And get out of my way. And look what's happened. I could see something similar happening with AI. This is not a trend. It's not a fad. It's not going to go away. In fact, it's only going to continue to improve. We're in like the bottom of the first inning or something like that as it comes to AI, at least as I see it. And I do see a lot of application on the land side. Like it just fundamentally makes a lot of sense. You scan a document, right? It comes off the computer, have your AI algorithm kind of do a quick read through and tell you what the document says. Like that's kind of nice, right? That's like mimicking a human task and saving a lot of time. So just sort of one small example of what that could look like. Question for you on kind of operated versus non-op. Like you've seen both. Like culturally, are there big differences between like a true non-op focused company versus an operated company? Is it just sort of all like one and the same? Like tell me a little bit about some of the similarities or differences, if you see any, in working for an operated company versus a non-op.
They're pros and cons. I mean, there are certainly aspects that are easier or more straightforward when you're only dealing with non-op assets.
Sure.
But then there are other challenges that are unique to non-op. We don't have direct control over the data that we receive. And so we're aggregating, and we have over 100 different operating partners. And so we're getting reports in potentially 100 different formats that we're having to, or AFEs from all these different partners we're having to assimilate and manage. And then, in order to have the same production volumes, like I said, we have to buy a lot more assets. So the amount of data that we're dealing with is potentially 5 or 10 times as much as if we were an operator. So there are unique challenges, but I think that's also our opportunity because we have ownership in so many wells. We have potentially more data, more visibility into the basin than anyone else. We own in over half the horizontal wells in the Bakken, and I don't think there's anyone else who can say that.
No. So interesting. So you kind of like, if I'm reverse engineering this, understand a lot about a lot of different operators based on what you receive from them, right? I mean, I would think that that's kind of a unique place to be as a company, where then maybe you have your preferences of who you do want to work with or who you don't want to work with, even just based on how easy it is to get a hold of information from some of those companies. Like that to me, that's a little bit, it's unique and fascinating, right? It's almost in some ways like what I've done in my career, where yes, if you work for an operator, right, you're at one company, right, and you're sending out your revenue statements and you're sending out relevant information, but you're focused on your company. Whereas if you come in as a consultant or a salesperson, you're going to all these different companies, right, and you kind of get a different scope of the whole ecosystem, and maybe get a little bit more information than you would if you were just working for one single company. So that's neat. Like, do you guys like meet with other operators and spend time with them and talk, like go to their operations where you have non-op interests, or is it like much more hands off than that?
All of the above. I mean, it depends on the nature of our ownership. We've been doing a lot of joint partnerships with operators where we have a more hands-on relationship with the assets, and we've also have more of what maybe most people think about with non-op, where it's just a purely minority ownership that you're buying into. So it varies.
Got it. So you're a publicly traded company, so I have to be careful the kinds of questions that I ask. But
correct.
But as a publicly traded company, like I'm curious, right? Like differences in working at a publicly traded company in your role, right, versus working at a privately funded, oil and gas non-op company. Is it the same fundamentally for somebody like you, or is it like significantly different by like there are certain procedures and compliances that we have to follow that may have been slightly more loose in non-public companies?
Largely the same. I mean, the investor money is still the most important thing. So regardless of whether it's public or private, you're still held to a high standard in your controls and processes. From a public side, there is obviously the living your life quarter to quarter, not taking vacations during, when that these certain reports are going to be due. That's one difference, but largely I would say it's the same. It has been a good learning experience to have experience in both. Yeah.
I've had people on from public companies too, where it's slightly different, right? There's a different level of approval. There might be like a PR person, right? Whereas a lot of these smaller private companies don't have that. But then there's also ideas and thoughts around like, hey, I don't know how many people are going to listen to this podcast, a few hundred, right? Let's say 400 or 500 people listen to this podcast. But if any of those people potentially are investors, right, shareholders in your company, they don't want you to release the podcast around the same time of an earnings call, right? Like it's really kind of more tightly controlled from that perspective. And I get it. It's somebody's job. Want to hold anything down. We can't have any information getting out whatsoever, even though we keep it pretty vague. But really interesting to me, like, what you think my podcast is going to move the needle at all? It's like it doesn't matter, right? Like there's just checks and balances and things in place that have to happen. I want to put you on the hot seat for a minute, and not that I haven't for the last 35, but ask you some questions that maybe I hadn't prepared you for, or just sort of get your take on. So one that I love asking people is what advice would you give to your younger self? Like whether that's you at 18 or that's you at 21 or even 25, like, wisdom is the greatest teacher. And I'm curious what you would tell younger Jordan McGee.
Yeah, there's probably a lot there, but I think one thing that I was afraid of early on, I didn't want to close any doors to future opportunities. And so I was nervous to specialize, in any given area. And I mean, non-op land technology is about as niche as you can go. And it's been a great career. And I think the advice would be to not be afraid of specialization and to be recognized as the subject matter expert in a given area.
Well, I would say that you've done that pretty successfully. So well done. You've got a title that only 2 other people have. I mean, I could search Zoom info, but nonetheless, in terms of like your stint in Minnesota, you think you're going to be there for the next 20 years? Like, are your kids going to grow up and be like Minnesota kids, or is like there a tug on you to come back to Oklahoma? Like I'm assuming your wife's also from Oklahoma, right?
My wife's from Oklahoma. She actually did a stint in Houston before we were married. So she had to buy a completely new wardrobe coming up here. But yeah, I mean, our 4-year-old said oofta the other day. So she is definitely growing up pure blood Minnesotan. And, we certainly hope to be here for the long run. I think all the ingredients are there. So that's our goal.
That's awesome. No, that's cool. Where's the next place that you're going to travel internationally?
Like I said, we just wrapped up South America.
I got to get there.
So I don't know. Yeah. Got any tips? Any recommendations?
You're so much more like well-traveled than I am. Like I had such a good time in Paris and London, but I think, London was like more for work. Like that was a business trip. And just due to the difference in time zone, I was going in at the equivalent of 2 a.m. Denver time, which is 9 a.m. in London, and working until whatever that is, 11 a.m. Denver time. So then I would go back to my hotel and I'd be getting peppered with emails and text messages and stuff. So I started realizing, I'm like, this doesn't work. You can't work like 2 time zones, right? Because then you're truly working 15-hour days. And I just don't do well with that. I think everybody has like their own capacity for what they can do and be effective with. And I tend to top out at like 55, 60 hours a week. There's only so much time I can stare at a screen and be effective. Some people are workaholics. Like I've kind of had to accept, like I will definitely work hard, but at some point, 55, 60 hours, it's like diminishing returns. So, London was cool, but then I was just like, man, I got to go to Paris. I want to go check this out. So Paris was really cool. And I think one of the things I like about it is I've always loved the Olympics, especially the Summer Olympics, and Paris has the Olympics this year. So to see like the contrast between old, because there's a lot of really old in Paris, whether it be buildings or museums or art, and then the new, which is like building brand new facilities and courts and bleachers and things for the Olympics coming up, was like a really neat and cool contrast. I think if I had more time, I'd probably head a little bit more east. I really want to go to Greece, right? So now I'm going down like a rabbit hole. Have you been?
Yeah, we did Athens and Santorini. Would love to get into some of the smaller islands, the lesser known, more authentic islands.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, man. My mom's side of my family is all Greek, right? So,
nice.
Came over from Greece or wherever they came from to get to Massachusetts. So my mom has been there a few times. My dad's been there. Even my younger sister's been there. I'm like, yeah, I need to get to Greece, right? I was even looking up flights to Athens on the flight back from London. I'm like, this could be a problem. I see where all my money could start to go.
Yeah. I mean, Paris is a great recommendation. And like I said, my wife is still itching to go. It's been a long time since I was there. I would love to go back.
Yeah. The Olympics should be awesome. Just the like aesthetic visuals are going to be tremendous. And you know, I'd never been to Japan. I would love to check out Japan, right? See that.
Same. Yeah.
That would be a ton of fun. So final question, right? Just want to throw this out to you. You have pretty good insight into the oil and gas space, right? And as well as the technology space. Tell me, like, what does the oil and gas industry look like in 10 years? We talk about sustainability. We talk about the energy transition or energy addition. We talk about geothermal. We talk about hydrogen. Like, I'm just kind of curious from a high level perspective. Do you think it's going to be similar to how it is now, sort of based on what you've seen, or do you think like the composition of energy that's provided to people will look substantially different? Because 10 years is, believe it or not, kind of a long time.
Gosh, that could be a whole different podcast. And you know, if I could read the future, I think I'd be in a completely different spot right now. So I think there's a lot of interesting potential. I think oil and gas will definitely still be around. I think there's going to be a lot of advancements in technology that allow the entire industry to be more efficient and tighten up controls. I know the ESG space is still very acutely watched, and I think that you'll see a lot of transformation continue in that area. But like you said, I know there are a lot of other interesting potentials. I mean, the ones you mentioned, I can't remember if you mentioned lithium too. I mean, there's a lot that's that the same type of drilling and extraction technology or the same type of real asset management can translate to.
Yeah, good call on lithium. You know, I think for me, geothermal is incredibly interesting right now. It seems like there's a new geothermal company popping up like every day, or at least every week. And my whole thought process is, I get it. Like if you look at some of the companies that are doing geothermal drilling, like fundamentally it makes sense. My whole thing is like, how do you know where it is? Right? Like it's a little bit different for oil and gas where you have these like proven plays, right? It's a longer running industry. Geothermal though, like where's the data? right? Like there's not like the whatever IHS or Enverus for geothermal data, I don't think, right? So there's probably an opportunity on the tech side there. How do you know where to go? You just go near a volcano or something? Like for me, maybe I'm just not smart enough to fully understand it, but how do you know where this geothermal resource is? You know? I'm not looking for an answer from you, but I'm just curious. How do you find it? To me, it seems like it's harder to find.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just identified your next guest. You got to find somebody on the geology side that's really chasing this stuff. From my perspective, I feel like my responsibility is managing whatever assets we acquire. So,
Yeah.
they're all real assets, and it's my job to figure out a way to keep track of the contractual rights and obligations associated with whatever type of energy or assets we acquire.
Yeah, so that's fun, right? Without revealing what
Yeah.
NOGs are, it's totally possible that all of a sudden something hits your radar and you're like, well, this is different. Okay. Gonna need to find a way to manage this right here. This is not as traditional, but that's I think some of the fun stuff that you have going from a future standpoint. Jordan, where can people find you? Where can they find your company? Northern and Jordan McGee. Where you at?
Yeah, I'm available on LinkedIn. Like I said, we are a small team, but I'm hiring in my team right now. So would love people who are interested in learning more to reach out to me directly. And then our website, noginc.com, and New York Stock Exchange, NOG.
There you go. Well, Jordan, I really appreciate you coming on. I know this is your first podcast, which I always love. I love getting people on for the first time. You did a nice job, and I also want to thank you for kind of your openness in terms of exploring new technologies, and then being open about what some of the challenges are with specific technology solutions and broadly within the energy space. So my advice to you is just to continue down that path of exploring new technology and finding better ways to do things because you truly are the VP of land technology for the oil and gas industry.